How I started writing. I have been writing all of my life, but many times I didn't even realize that I was, or that one day I would be writing books. When I was really little, like 5 years old, I would color coloring book pages like most kids. When I finished coloring them, I would rip them out and write one simple sentence, forming a story with all of the pictures. For example, one time I colored a winter Christmas coloring pictures. I formed a story about how that small town celebrated Christmas. One page that had bells on, the sentence I had at the bottom read something like, "When the bells ring, all the town gathers around to sing." Then on the next page was a Christmas tree, and I would say, "They would stand around the Christmas tree." When I was coloring and writing short stories like that to go with the pictures, I never thought of it as writing. To me, it was just something fun to do and made sense to make a story out of related pictures. I really enjoyed doing it too. It was so much fun coloring pictures and forming them into stories. Later, when I was out in the summer, after I believe it was 3rd grade, but I'm really not sure, I wrote a very short story. My best friend at the time, Caitlin, was over, and I like to think of her as my sister. Unfortunately, I have no sister, which, since I've always wished for a sister, is why most of my story characters have sisters and not so much brothers. I always wanted a sister, and Caitlin would be over so much I considered her my sister. For whatever reason, I do not know, but I began writing a short story, which I called Not All Sisters Fight. I had it about Caitlin and I said how we would work things out when we would disagree. Just as before, I did not consider this as writing. All this was to me was simply something I did because I was bored. Towards the end of my 4th grade year, my teacher told us that we would have to write a story. It would not matter how short or long it was. I don't remember why he had us write a story, but that doesn't matter. I had no idea what my story would be about. In fact, I was worried I would not be able to think on one before it was due. Sort of like how in the Sea of Paper, Beth had been given that assignment in 7th grade and was lost where to begin. My teacher announced to the class that we could get as wild as we wanted. At that moment, I had all of these ideas coming to me as he spoke. I didn't really hear the rest of what he said, for I was too busy writing these ideas down in my head. All of these crazy ideas I put into the story. Maybe like Beth, I'll come back to that story and add far more details because it actually is one of my favorites. Definitely different and imaginative and crazy. Once more, I am here revising the story, and I actually did weave more into the story mentioned above. It is one of the short stories in Volume 3. Still, at this point, I never even thought about writing books. It wasn't until about mid-March or April in 5th grade that I started writing. We had an assembly with an author that came to speak. He was really enthusiastic and kept the audience involved. I do not know what it was that he said that got me writing, but I went home that night with an idea for a book. I began to handwrite the first chapter. The next day, when I went to my dad's house, I turned on my computer and began typing the book I started writing the day before. I had so much fun writing that book that I decided to continue writing books, continuing from that one, forming a short stories. These books were different from all before that point because they were longer and even had chapters, even though it was about maybe 16 pages at that time. Every time after that, on my dad's weekends, I would write a short story. Also, at that point, I did not consider being a writer. These short stories were just something I did for fun. By 7th grade, I decided I wanted to be a writer. Now, the smallest things or phrases could give me an idea for a part in a book or a whole story, like with the Sea of Paper. For more reading adventures with Maggie, subscribe below. Thanks for listening!